Codename, Villanelle. The Whiny Angel. Written by Johnny Gustafson. Based on the novels by Luke Jennings. Chapter I, The Ordinary Pursuit. The bus rumbled down the cobbled streets of Paris, jostling Gabriel in his seat as he peered out of the foggy window at the world passing by. The Eiffel Tower loomed in the distance, shrouded in early morning mist, but for Gabriel, it was just another day in pursuit of the ordinary, a quest he held dear to his heart. With his headphones on, Gabriel listened to music that fueled his dreams, songs about hope, friendship, and finding one's place in the world. He closed his eyes and imagined himself living a perfect life, earning good grades, making genuine friends, and perhaps even sharing his love for mecha manga with someone who understood. But shadows from his past lingered like the fog outside. Those days of stealing figures and rare editions had felt exhilarating at the time, each conquest fueling his desire to fit in with the boys at school. However, that thrill faded when he was caught, humiliation washing over him like icy water. Mr. Duval had given him a second chance, offering guidance instead of punishment, and Gabriel had promised to change. As he disembarked at the school, the vibrant murals splashed across the walls of the entrance brought a smile to his face. It was an uninhibited display of creativity, something he admired deeply. He wished he could express himself through art like those talented students, but for now, he focused on his studies. "Hey, Gab!" Jody called as she spotted him, her bright red backpack swinging at her side. "Ready for the rehearsal later? We might get the lead roles." Gabriel nodded, feeling a spark of excitement. Jody had been a great friend, always encouraging him to step out of his comfort zone. "Yeah, I've been practicing my lines. I think I'm finally getting the hang of it." "Good. Just remember, it's all about emotions. You've got to feel it." She winked, her enthusiasm infectious. The two exchanged smiles, a reminder that amid his struggles, there were moments of connection and belonging. Classes passed in a blur, math equations sprawled across the blackboard, history lessons on the French Revolution igniting debates among classmates, and lunch in the bustling cafeteria filled with laughter. Gabriel felt the weight of expectation lift slightly. He was doing well, staying out of trouble, and embracing the ordinary. Later, as the afternoon sunlight poured into the rehearsal room, he stood nervously facing Jody, who was playing the leading lady opposite him. The drama club was putting on a modern adaptation of a classic play, and he wanted to impress everyone not just for the role, but to prove to himself that he was more than his past mistakes. "Take a deep breath," Jody said softly, sensing his nerves. "You've got this." He inhaled deeply, recalling the discipline he had cultivated over the past year. He could almost visualize the mecha robots he once coveted, their bravado giving way to his dream of being brave on stage. He began to deliver his lines with a sincerity he hadn't known he possessed, losing himself in the performance. After a successful rehearsal, the buzz of excitement filled the air. Jody came over with a wide smile. "See? You're not just ordinary, Gabriel. You're remarkable." Her words struck a chord within him. Perhaps being ordinary didn't mean lacking extraordinary qualities. It meant finding joy in small victories and building a life where he could embrace both his passions and his responsibilities. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Parisian sky in hues of orange and pink, Gabriel felt a renewed sense of hope. Walking home, he passed a little shop that displayed colorful manga figures in the window. For a fleeting moment, he considered going inside, his fingers itching to pick up the familiar packaging of his beloved mecha heroes. But then, he thought about his promise to himself, a promise for an ordinary life filled with expected joys, not fleeting thrills. With a resolute shake of his head, he moved forward, eager to return to his family and share tales of his day. The ordinary path stretched out before him, a canvas waiting to be painted with experiences, friendships, and, like a good story, a touch of adventure. As he approached his apartment building, Gabriel knew he had not merely escaped his past, he had transformed it. Title: The Weight of Choices. Setting * Gabriel's family apartment in Paris, the warm glow of the dining room reflecting a typical evening filled with home-cooked meals and heartfelt conversations. Gabriel sat quietly at the dinner table, the aroma of his mother's coq au vin wafting through the air. The scent intertwined with the light chatter of his parents as they discussed their workday, each mention of an upcoming project or presentation echoing the sacrifices they had made for their careers. "Your father has a big meeting next week," his mother said, her eyes sparkling with pride. "It could mean a promotion." Gabriel nodded, forcing a smile even though his stomach twisted into knots. He felt the weight of their expectations pressing down on him, and the truth weighed heavier still. The holiday trip to Bordeaux, planned around him, loomed just over the horizon. They deserved a break, something they had worked hard for, but he wasn't sure he felt deserving of it. His past mistakes felt like shadows stretching in every corner of his mind, undermining the life his parents envisioned for him. "Isn't it exciting, Gabriel?" his father asked, looking directly at him, his voice brimming with warmth. "A chance to explore a new place together." "Yeah, it'll be great," Gabriel mumbled, his fork picking at the food in front of him rather than his heart. Minutes slipped away in silence, punctuated only by the clinking of silverware against plates. As his parents spoke of their dreams and ambitions, Gabriel couldn't shake the gnawing guilt that he carried. Tonight, he was hiding something significant beneath the surface. The next day dawned with a briskness that sent a chill through the Paris streets. As Gabriel made his way to school, the heaviness of his secret settled deeper in his chest. It gnawed at him, yet he clung on to the feeling of power it gave him. There was a thrill in being both the perfect son and the secret keeper. When he arrived at school, whispers and murmurs filled the hallways. His classmate, Leo, was pacing in front of the lockers, eyes wide in disbelief. "What do you mean it's gone?" Leo exclaimed, throwing his hands up dramatically. "My Metal Gear Rex is missing." Gabriel's heart raced, panic surging through him, but he managed to keep his expression neutral. Jody approached, her brow furrowed with concern. She noticed the commotion and turned to Gabriel, her voice low but firm. "Did you hear what happened, Gabriel?" "Leo's been looking everywhere for it." Gabriel could feel her gaze drilling into him, just shy of suspicion, but he maintained his innocence. "That really sucks for him. I hope he finds it." As the day progressed, whispers of the missing figure grew around him, dragging him into an uncomfortable spotlight he hadn't wanted. Tension electrified the classroom atmosphere in the absence of the prized collectible, and all eyes seemed to dart in Gabriel's direction when the topic came up. Later that afternoon, a meeting was called with Mr. Duval and the class's parents, including Gabriel's. Gabriel's heart sank as he entered the room. The tension was palpable as Leo described the theft, frustration flooding his voice. "There's a thief among us," he declared, glancing accusingly at Gabriel, who just stared at his shoes, hoping no one would notice the guilt etched on his face. "Gabriel wouldn't steal anything," Jody interjected, her voice steady yet anxious. "He's not like that." But doubts floated in the air, weaving through the conversations around the table. Gabriel's parents, concerned, exchanged worried glances as Mr. Duval mediated between the students and their parents. The conversation became a cacophony of accusations and defenses, none of which seemed to lead anywhere productive. Gabriel felt like a ghost in the room, his truth hidden behind layers of silence. Finally, as the meeting drew to a close without resolution, Gabriel slipped out, his heart pounding in his chest. He walked home alone, the weight of the stolen Metal Gear Rex hidden beneath his jacket. Each step felt heavier than the last, the figure pressing against him a reminder of both his actions and the facade he continued to uphold. As he approached his street, the reality of what he had done crushed down on him. This epic win he had sought, the game changer that would grant him acceptance, now felt like shackles around his conscience. He had wanted to blend into normalcy, to belong among peers who esteemed collections and camaraderie, yet here he was, standing at the precipice of a decision. Gabriel took a long breath, feeling the mixed emotions of pride and shame blend within him. Just as he reached the door to his apartment, he hesitated. Title: The Weight of Choices. Gabriel entered his home, the familiar scent of his mother's cooking enveloping him like a warm embrace. He took a moment to collect himself, glancing down at the hidden Metal Gear Rex resting in his hands. It was a vivid reminder of the day's events, a monumental conflict between his yearning for acceptance and the shadow of his secret. "Gabriel, dear. Dinner's ready," his mother called from the kitchen, her voice bright with joy. Gabriel forced a smile as he walked toward the dining area, hurriedly slipping the stolen figure into his backpack. On the table, he saw his favorite dish: buttery mashed potatoes, succulent chicken, and crisp green beans. A delicious aroma wafted through the air, and for a moment, his worries subsided. His parents gathered around, their faces glowing with pride. "All packed for the trip tomorrow," his father announced, beaming. As they sat down, Gabriel wished he could feel the same enthusiasm but felt a heaviness in his heart. They discussed their plans for Bordeaux, excited about the sights and experiences awaiting them. "You're going to love it, Gabriel," his mother said, her eyes sparkling with affection. "We've planned some fun activities just for you." Every cheerful word struck a chord within him. Their belief in him, in their perfect son, contrasted sharply with the truth he was hiding. He longed to be that boy they envisioned, the kind who brought joy and laughter without secrets. Yet, at school, he had become accustomed to blending into the shadows, a shy genius in physics who maneuvered through life with the grace of invisibility. In a crowd, he was an unassuming presence, better known for whispering brilliant ideas than for being the center of attention. Today had been particularly awkward. Whispers and glances had followed him post-meeting like a fog of suspicion. Jody had come to his defense, and while grateful, he felt the scrutiny weighing heavily on his shoulders. Something inside him relished the blend of intellect and anonymity, an elegant balance between brilliance and solitude. That was how he had become a master chief in the intricate game of life, carefully avoiding the pitfalls of drawing too much attention. But now, the reality of possessing the Metal Gear Rex began to shift the foundation of his existence. Though it completed his collection and promised acceptance among his peers, it did so through deception. As the dinner settled, he thought about his desires. The world around him felt meaningless, devoid of joy unless everything remained uniform, predictable. To be one of a million ordinary angels seemed like the ultimate aspiration, a tranquil heaven where no truths were questioned, where every soul silently shared the experience of simply existing. Still, deep within, a flicker of resistance ignited. Did he really want this path? The journey towards normalcy was paved with small betrayals, each choice pulling him farther from the loving son his parents believed him to be. That night, as Gabriel lay in bed, the darkness wrapped around him, and beneath the sheets, he felt the weight of the Metal Gear Rex pressing against him. The feeling of exhilaration and dread coiled in tandem as he considered what it meant to hide behind the mask of invincibility he created. What would it take to be truly free? He whispered into the night, the answer lingering unspoken among the distant stars. He closed his eyes, imagining a world where honesty illuminated rather than obscured, where he didn't have to navigate the murky waters of guilt. As sleep finally embraced him, Gabriel knew that change was on the horizon. Tomorrow in Bordeaux, amidst the beauty and wonder, he had a decision to make, a leap towards authenticity he had yet to confront. He was still Gabriel, still the boy adored by his parents, but perhaps he could also be brave enough to let go of the burden he carried. Title: The Edge of Tomorrow. The final day at school loomed heavy over Gabriel's heart. It was a bittersweet moment for a shy genius, overshadowed by the inevitable departure from a place that had become both a refuge and a prison. Although he excelled in physics, often outmatching every challenge presented to him, there was always Kenta Fulci, his classmate, his rival, and his friend who seemed to snatch the spotlight just moments before Gabriel could reach for it. Kenta was the embodiment of humbleness, a hard worker who wore his achievements lightly. Gabriel admired him but felt an unshakable pang of frustration in the shadow of Kenta's brilliance. As the last bell rang, there was an electrifying energy in the air, a mix of excitement and relief as students prepared for their brief holiday. For Gabriel, though, it also meant a temporary escape from both the scrutiny and the unsaid expectations placed upon him. He wanted nothing more than to go home, a sanctuary where he could slip into anonymity and let the world fade away. But today, fate had other plans. His father's car careened into the schoolyard, a whirlwind of dust and gravel. The tires skidded slightly as he pulled into a parking spot with the confidence of a skilled driver. There was an undeniable thrill in watching the vehicle move through the chaos of students and teachers alike, almost as if his father were piloting a ship through stormy seas. Some staff members exchanged glances, clearly hoping this would be the last time they'd see Gabriel again, a sentiment that stung him deeply. "Gabriel! Get in," his father called out, eyes bright with mischief. Gabriel obliged, sliding into the passenger seat as the door shut with a soft thud behind him. Before he could settle in, his father presented him with a melting ice cream cone, a sweet reward for enduring the last weeks of school. "Thanks, Dad," Gabriel mumbled, his thoughts still entangled in the day's events. He took a lick of the ice cream, savoring the cool sweetness, but his mind raced back to grades and reports, the ongoing tug-of-war between expectation and reality. "We really need to talk about my physics project. I think I could have done better." His father chuckled, brushing off the concern with a wave of his hand. "Oakman, you worry too much. You'll do fine. Just hurry up and enjoy that ice cream before it melts all over the place." His voice took on a teasing tone, lightening the mood. "You might be dead in a week if you don't." With that, the car shot forward, defying the usual pace of life. Gabriel felt the rush of adrenaline as they sped away from the school, leaving behind whispers and the heavy atmosphere of judgment. His father had perfect control not just of the car but of the narrative of life itself. He treated each day like a grand adventure, relishing the moments fiercely. Gabriel envied that power, the ability to steer one's own fate, to dance with death and emerge unscathed. "Do you ever think about how fleeting everything is?" Gabriel found himself asking, glancing out the window as buildings blurred by in a flurry of colors. "Like, what if it all just ends?" His father's laughter filled the confines of the car, a rich, reassuring sound. "Life's a ride, buddy. Sometimes we speed up, sometimes we take it slow. All that matters is how we navigate through it." He glanced sideways at Gabriel, his expression suddenly serious. "And as long as I'm behind the wheel, I'll make sure you're safe, all right?" Gabriel nodded, allowing the warmth of his father's words to sink in. Perhaps he could learn something from this moment, a lesson on navigating the storms and the calm alike. He realized that while he may feel small against the backdrop of life's vast complexities, he held a map of his own. It was time to chart a course toward authenticity, letting go of what others thought and embracing the person he could truly become. As they drove further away from the school, the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting warm hues across the sky. Gabriel took another lick of his ice cream, savoring not just the sweetness but the potential of tomorrow. In this fleeting journey, he could choose to embrace who he really was, rivalries, struggles, and all. The road ahead stretched infinitely, and for the first time in a while, he felt the pull of hope in his heart. The hum of the engine, the rhythmic thrum of wheels rolling over asphalt, and the gentle sway of the car lulled Gabriel into a peaceful sleep. His body sank into the plush seat, his eyelids growing heavy as the world outside faded away. In this half-dreaming state, he felt special, different in ways he couldn't quite articulate, like an ordinary edition of an extraordinary species. In his dreams, he sensed his mother smiling back at him, her warmth wrapping around him like a comforting blanket. Gabriel drifted between awareness and oblivion, caught in that delicate balance where thoughts merged with dreams. He could hear his father's voice, steady and calm, punctuated by the soft sound of the tires gripping the road. It was a melody he knew by heart, his father, behind the wheel, the epitome of control. But amidst this comfort, a nagging sense of unease flickered in the recesses of his mind. He squirmed slightly, still tethered to the soft embrace of sleep, when an unsettling feeling crept in. Was it a premonition, or merely a figment of his dreaming mind? A sudden sense of foreboding washed over him. It felt like death was coiled in the back seat, patiently waiting for its moment. As if summoned by his fears, a truck loomed on the horizon, barreling down the curved road like a hungry predator. The curve had been neglected for years, a glaring oversight no one seemed willing to address despite the multiple complaints from concerned citizens. Gabriel's heart raced as he instinctively sensed danger. Time seemed to warp around him, stretching minutes into endless seconds as he fought against the haze of sleep to wake up to warn them. He wanted to scream, to shake his father awake from whatever oblivion cloaked him. "Dad! Watch out!" But the words never formed, they were lost in the depths of his subconscious. In a blink, the truck was there, encroaching upon their vehicle with all the grace of an inevitable disaster. Gabriel's eyes shot open, wide with terror, just in time to see the looming shadow cast by the enormous vehicle. He turned toward his parents, hoping to find reassurance, but all he saw was his mother's smile, so blissfully unaware. Was this the last time he would see her face? "Dad, please." The urgency coursed through him now, a primal instinct kicking in. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. His father remained oblivious, focused on the road ahead, oblivious to the nightmare emerging from the corner of his eye. The next moments stretched endlessly. Gabriel felt the car lurch ever so slightly as his father swerved, too late to evade the impending doom. Time slowed, and in that dreadful instant, Gabriel understood that perfection, however meticulously crafted, could shatter like glass against the harsh edges of fate. Tires screeched and metal crumpled, a cacophony of chaos erupting around them. Gabriel braced himself, the force of impact a crushing wave that sent shockwaves through his body. And then darkness enveloped him, pulling him beneath the waves of consciousness, muffling screams and cries. In that void, he sensed that he was spared a cruel twist of fate, leaving him in a world now devoid of laughter, love, and warmth. As the darkness closed in, he found himself wrestling with a bitter truth: life continued without those who made it worth living. Gabriel awoke, seemingly alone, suspended in a reality now stripped of meaning, a survivor burdened with the weight of sorrow and the haunting knowledge of what could have been. In the aftermath, Gabriel faced a haunting emptiness, not just as a witness to devastation but as a bearer of a twisted gift, a life that continued while his parents' laughter echoed only in memory, a life he felt was no longer worthy of any living human being. Days drifted by like leaves caught in a gentle breeze, each one blending into the next, indistinguishable from the last. Gabriel found himself in a world that felt both surreal and painfully real, a place too quiet, where the absence of familiar voices hung in the air like a thick fog. The sterile walls whispered secrets he couldn't decipher, filled with echoes of what had once been vibrant laughter and warmth. He shuffled through the dim corridors, his body a patchwork of injuries, cracked skin on his arms, bruises mottling his legs, and a lingering ache that seemed to resonate from deep within him. He caught glimpses of himself in reflective surfaces, pale and gaunt, one eye searching for light while the other remained shrouded in darkness, as if the universe had swallowed the stars whole. A remnant of fear nestled in his chest, mingling with the uncertainty of his own image. Did he look so bad? As he wandered, he noticed strange figures floating by, clowns with balloon animals, bright colors juxtaposed against the muted tones of his reality. They collected change from passers-by, their laughter light and carefree, a haunting contrast to the weight pressing down on him. It was as if they danced on the edge of fear, laughing in defiance, unaware of the abyss lurking just beneath the surface of their playful antics. But Gabriel felt his heart constrict at the sound of joy. Where were the echoes of his parents' laughter? Those carefree moments now felt like distant memories, frayed and fading. He desperately sought to cling to them, but the more he tried, the more they slipped through his fingers like sand in an hourglass. He didn't want to remember the answer, the harsh truth that lay buried under layers of grief. In the silence that enveloped him, another truth emerged: they were gone. The realization settled heavily on his shoulders, a cloak woven with sorrow and disbelief. Each laugh that floated past him only deepened the chasm of loss. Gabriel turned away from the clowns, their laughter feeling like a cruel reminder of a happiness that was no longer his. Instead, he sought the solace of solitude, where silence wrapped around him like a fragile cocoon. Here, in this quiet space, he could confront the shadows creeping along the edges of his mind, memories that hurt too much to hold onto but too compelling to let go. He let out a shaky breath, staring into the abyss of his darkened eye, searching for answers that evaded him. Perhaps, in this silence, he could find a flicker of hope, a path to understanding, or at least to acceptance. As days turned into weeks, Gabriel learned to navigate the void, piecing together fragments of himself, slowly understanding that it was okay to acknowledge the pain. Only then could he begin to heal. The sterile scent of antiseptic hung heavily in the air, a reminder of the clinical world Gabriel found himself trapped in. He watched as a doctor moved to the neighboring bed, a woman who seemed to be trembling beneath the thin hospital sheets. Her eyes darted around the room, filled with a mix of fear and desperation. He could hear her voice, a low whisper tinged with a thick Russian accent, pleading for something, anything, that would assure her safety. He noticed how the doctor leaned closer, their conversation hushed but urgent. It was clear there was more at stake here than mere medical concerns. Gabriel's heart raced as he caught snippets of their exchange, his curiosity piqued. The doctor promised her something, safety, perhaps if she would simply trust him until the end of his shift. And then he turned away, leaving her alone, anxiety radiating from her like heat from the pavement on a summer day. Gabriel, still adrift in his own dizzying thoughts, felt a strange urge to reach out. He had been so focused on his own burdens that he hadn't considered someone else might also be carrying invisible weights. She picked up her medicine, her hands shaking slightly as she fumbled with the bottle. "Don't take that," he called softly, his voice hoarse yet firm. "It makes you weird." She glanced at him, surprise flashing across her face before a sad smile broke through. "It's too late for me," she replied, her tone laced with a resignation that tugged at his heart. "Why are you here?" Gabriel asked, his curiosity shifting into concern. Her gaze fell, and for a moment, the walls around her seemed to close in, as if encapsulating the pain she bore. "The love of my life stabbed me," she said, voice heavy with an emotion that transcended simple hurt. Gabriel furrowed his brow, confusion mingling with sympathy. "Girls don't stab people," he replied, trying to inject some levity into the somber air. Her laughter was short-lived, almost a choked sound, but it held a strange beauty amidst the chaos. "Ah, but people in love do the craziest things," she said, her dark eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I can't explain it. Love makes you blind, and sometimes it makes you reckless." Gabriel felt a pang of understanding. He had never known that kind of love, not the kind where pain and tenderness intertwined in such a tortured dance. "But it doesn't have to be this way," he murmured. "Love shouldn't hurt." She looked at him, her expression softening. "In a perfect world, perhaps. But love is messy, Gabriel. It's unpredictable." He pondered her words, realizing that her pain echoed his own, albeit in a different form. Each scar and each bruise carried the weight of stories untold, experiences that shaped them into who they were now. "Do you think it will get better?" he asked, vulnerability slipping through his carefully constructed defenses. "It has to," she replied, her voice steadier this time, as though she were trying to convince herself as much as him. "We have to hold on to hope, even when everything seems dark." Silence settled between them, a fragile bond forming as they shared the space of their struggle. In that moment, amidst the chaos of their wounds, Gabriel felt less alone. Perhaps there was solace in connection, in understanding that everyone carried their battles, and sometimes all it took was a simple conversation to lighten the load, if only just a little. The tension in the room began to crack as Villanelle's curiosity flickered back to life, her initial fears retreating just a little. She glanced at Gabriel, who was still grappling with the weight of his own thoughts. "What's your name?" she asked, a hint of reluctance hiding behind her playful tone. "Gabriel," he replied, intrigued by the sudden spark in her eyes. "And yours?" "Villanelle," she answered, smirking slightly as if the name carried its own secret. "Do you speak English?" she continued, tilting her head inquisitively. "English sucks," he joked lightly, wanting to keep the mood light. "Gabriel, we speak English," she corrected him, adopting a playful tone. "But I don't agree." "Okay, well, what's up?" he said, curious about where this conversation was heading. Villanelle's demeanor shifted as an idea sparked in her mind. "You wanna play a game?" Gabriel hesitated, unsure of where this might lead. "I'm too big for that." "No," she exclaimed, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Life is just ahead of you." He couldn't help but chuckle at her enthusiasm. "All right then, what's the game?" "Go out and play pirate." "Confiscate," she gleefully instructed, her energy infectious. Gabriel raised an eyebrow, skepticism creeping in. "Isn't that kinda illegal?" "Yep," she admitted cheerfully, shrugging as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "But I take full responsibility." "Do it." Gabriel felt a knot of worry tighten in his stomach. The idea of stepping outside, even for a moment, made the constant pain in his legs resurface. But part of him was drawn to her wild spirit. Could he really do this? Would his legs and foot hold up under the pressure? Taking a deep breath, he mentally assessed himself. Yes, he could do it slowly, but securely. With determination, he pushed himself off the edge of the bed, feeling the familiar ache wash over him. Each step was a challenge, but he battled through the discomfort, reminding himself that this moment was about more than just walking, it was about breaking free, at least for a little while. When he returned, a canvas bag slung over his shoulder, Villanelle's eyes lit up like fireworks. "You did it," she cheered, clapping her hands together. "What did you get?" Gabriel opened the bag, revealing a collection of odd trinkets and forgotten items, a discarded toy sword, a few snacks, and some shiny coins. "Stolen goods, right?" he laughed, holding them up like trophies of their little adventure. Villanelle squealed with delight, her earlier distress seemingly forgotten. "Look at all this treasure. You're a natural at being a pirate." Her laughter danced in the air, and for a brief moment, the weight of their shared burdens lifted, replaced by the sweet taste of rebellion and camaraderie. They both knew it was just a fleeting escape, but in that moment, it felt like they had conquered their own realities together, two unlikely companions in a world that had tried so hard to box them in. The promise of adventure, however small, filled the sterile hospital room with a sense of warmth and possibility. Chapter 2, The Weight of Secrets. In a dimly lit room, where shadows danced upon the walls, Villanelle rummaged through the clutter of an old, abandoned apartment. She was searching for anything of value, a forgotten trinket or a little money, something that could help her escape the muddled life she was caught in. Amidst broken furniture and dusty corners, her fingers grazed over something metallic. It was a necklace, glimmering faintly under the dim light. "Look what I've found," Villanelle said with a sly grin, holding the necklace aloft as though it were a trophy. "It'll do for a little escape fund." Gabriel, her friend and confidant, watched her with an amused expression. "You know, you should practice this as a habit, Villanelle. You're quite good at it." His words were laced with a hint of admiration. Feeling a rush of confidence, Villanelle pocketed the necklace and turned towards Gabriel, who stood beside his bed, lost in thought. He was still recovering from a horrible car accident that left him with lingering pain, but, always resilient, he maintained a facade of strength. She had been there for him throughout his recovery, a constant presence amidst the chaos. Gabriel took a step back towards his bed, his thoughts swirling, when suddenly, he slipped on a loose floorboard. Time seemed to slow down as he fell, his body hitting the ground with a thud that echoed through the silence. A sharp jolt of pain coursed through him, but he grit his teeth and pushed himself up again. Pain is academic at this rate, even the new ones, he chuckled painfully, trying to lighten the atmosphere despite the throbbing ache that spread across his body. His smile was short-lived as he caught the concerned look on Villanelle's face. Gabriel, you need to be careful, she stressed, her tone more serious. There are people after me, and I have to leave soon, visit my girlfriend in London. His expression shifted, alarmed. What do you mean, people after you? Villanelle stepped closer, her eyes glinting with the ferocity of someone accustomed to danger. Bad people. I can't explain now, but trust me, I need to get away. Gabriel's mind raced. He couldn't shake the feeling of dread. Is it about that woman you were with? The one who? Yes, Villanelle cut in, her voice dropping to a whisper. She stabbed me, Gabriel. It shocked me at first. I didn't think she would go that far. The admission stung her, more than the wound ever could. Gabriel frowned, concern washing over him, but why? Why would she do that? Villanelle's gaze wandered to the floor, her facade of strength faltering for a brief moment as she replied, because she wanted to show me how much she cared. It was twisted, I know, but that's the world we live in. Love and pain are often intertwined. Gabriel felt a weight settle in his chest. He thought of all the times Villanelle danced on the edges of danger, the thrill that drove her deeper into a life full of chaos. It's not love if it hurts, he muttered softly, but Villanelle's eyes sparkled with a wild determination. Perhaps. But life isn't black and white, Gabriel. Sometimes, it's the gray that you need to embrace, like pain. She stepped back, her decision made. I need to get to London before they find me. You'll be fine here, right? Before Gabriel could respond, Villanelle slipped into the shadows, her figure disappearing like a wisp of smoke. Alone in the darkened room, he felt the echo of her words, the realization settling in. Pain may be academic, he mused, but the weight of unspoken truths was an entirely different story. He winced as he adjusted himself on the bed, contemplating the storm that followed Villanelle everywhere she went, knowing that this time might just be the storm that swept her away for good. Chapter 3, The Disguise of Escape. Villanelle lay on the hospital bed, the sterile room around her a stark contrast to the chaos that had punctuated her life. Each sound a distant monitor beeping, the rustle of linen felt amplified in the dull haze of her thoughts. Slowly, she began to cautiously try to stand, her body protesting with an ache that shot through her limbs. But the determination that burned within her was stronger than the pain. Just then, the door creaked open, and a nurse entered, her presence exuding a mechanical kindness that Villanelle had come to dread. The nurse approached her with a small cup of pills, the white tablets rolling in a soft coiled spectrum of potential relief and potential captivity. Here, these will help with the pain, the nurse said, holding the cup out like an offering. Villanelle eyed the pills warily, her instincts flaring. In a swift motion, she grabbed the cup and tossed its contents harshly across the room. The tablets bounced off the wall and scattered like white pebbles across the floor. Hey, the nurse gasped in surprise, but Villanelle was already locked in a stare of defiance, her jaw clenched. Those will make me unable to walk, you know that, she replied, her voice a mixture of anger and desperation. She needed to be free, to run, not to be subdued further by anything or anyone. Gabriel, who had been leaning against the wall outside the room, felt his stomach knot as he overheard the commotion. He stepped into the room just as Villanelle's frustration boiled over, the tension between them palpable. Villanelle, you should take your pills, he urged gently, but she shook her head vehemently, her wild hair framing her face like a halo of rebellion. No. I refuse. Her voice trembled with a mix of fear and rage. If I take those, I might as well be in a cage. Gabriel sensed her walls closing in, and for a moment, he felt helpless. Villanelle was a force of nature, untamable and fierce, yet in this moment, she felt trapped. It made him ache to see her like this. He took a deep breath, eyes locking with hers. I'm not going to let you spiral deeper into this. With a heavy heart and a final glance at Villanelle, he stepped out of the room, the door clicking shut behind him. Villanelle leaned back against the pile of pillows and stared up at the ceiling, frustration boiling in her chest. The sterile ceiling tiles stared back, everything felt suffocatingly bright. She didn't want to be here, she wanted her life back, chaotic and vibrant. Moments later, the door creaked open again, and to her surprise, Gabriel stepped in wearing an oversized coat and a floppy hat that obscured his features. He looked utterly ridiculous, and for the first time that day, a smile threatened to break through Villanelle's frustration. "What in the world are you wearing?" she exclaimed, amusement flickering in her eyes despite the serious situation. "Disguise," he replied dramatically, gesturing with a flourish. "You're not the only one who needs to be clever, you know." He stepped closer, lowering his voice as though sharing a top-secret mission. "We have to get you out of here, and you can't look like Villanelle when we do it." Villanelle's expression shifted from incredulity to appreciation. "You really think that's going to work?" He nodded confidently. "Yes. But you need to trust me. I know how to play this game." She could see the determination in his eyes, mixed with a hint of worry. Maybe, just maybe, this plan might give her the opportunity they both craved. "Okay," she relented, her voice softer now. "But if we get caught, it's your head on the line too." "Deal," Gabriel said with a half-smile, thankful for her acceptance. "Now, let's get you ready." Villanelle swung her legs over the edge of the bed, the cool floor catching her by surprise, but with Gabriel's help, she slipped into the coat. The oversized fabric felt foreign, wrapping around her like a blanket of disguises. The hat obscured her face slightly, giving her an anonymity she desperately craved. She looked at Gabriel, her ally in this fight, and nodded. "Let's do this." As they moved towards the door, Villanelle felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps she could escape this place, these confines, and find her way to London to Eve. They walked with purpose, weaving through the hospital corridors, a duo clad in desperation and daring, ready to embrace the chaos that awaited them outside. For the first time in what felt like forever, Villanelle's spirit ignited with the thrill of freedom. Chapter 4, The Shadow's Embrace. Villanelle stood in her hospital room, her heart racing like a runaway train. She marveled at the way the white coat fell over her gown, camouflaging her eerily fragile appearance, but the disguise felt more like a prison than protection. Swallowing her distaste, she slipped on a pair of nursing shoes, silently cursing their uncomfortable fit. They squeaked slightly as she took her first few steps, but she had no time to dwell on the annoyance. Freedom beckoned. With cautious determination, Villanelle stepped out of her room, her eyes darting down the corridor. The fluorescent lights hum overhead, casting a harsh glow on the beige walls, making the ambience feel even more sterile. She moved swiftly, each step calculated yet fueled by an urgency that made her pulse thrum in her ears. Turning a corner, she spotted a supply closet, the holy grail of essential items for someone like her. Sliding the door open, she allowed herself a fleeting smile of triumph before stepping inside. The room was stuffed with boxes, syringes, and all manner of medical supplies. She grabbed a briefcase left on a shelf, quickly filling it with essentials, gauze, bandages, antiseptic wipes, and a handful of syringes that would serve her purposes later. The clatter of supplies echoed in her ears, but Villanelle was undeterred. This was her path to reclaiming her freedom. As she finished packing, the soft shuffle of footsteps made her freeze. Heart hammering in her chest, she could see a nearby room through the cracks in the closet door. Peeking out, she spotted a frail man lying in a bed, his breathing shallow, while a woman with tired eyes sat by his side, clutching a handbag with desperation but also an air of resignation. The sight tugged at Villanelle's heart, but greed flared brighter. If only for a moment, there was a chance to take what wasn't hers. She slipped out of the closet and crept into the room. The woman didn't notice at first, her eyes were locked on the man, worry etched across her face. Villanelle sidled up to the bedside, the briefcase weighted in her hand like a ticket to her escape. She feigned concern, adopting the mask of a caregiver. "Excuse me, I'm just checking in on Mr. Hargrove," she said sweetly, her voice low and soothing. The woman turned, her gaze shifting from despair to cautious hope. "Did you have any news?" the wife's voice cracked. Her face illuminated with a flicker of expectation, it shattered what little resolve Villanelle had left. With a poker face, Villanelle leaned in slightly, speaking in a conspiratorial tone. "I have good news." "Really?" The woman's eyes sparkled with disbelief, the tension in her shoulders easing momentarily. "Oh, thank God. What is it?" Before Villanelle could think too deeply about the consequences of her deception, she added, "The doctors are optimistic about the new treatment, and you should see improvements soon." It was a lie as sweet as nectar and poisonous as a viper, and the woman's relief wrapped around her like a cloak. "Thank you. Thank you," the wife exclaimed, throwing her arms around Villanelle in a hug. The warmth of the embrace sent both comfort and guilt cascading through Villanelle. Yet, she couldn't afford to let the moment linger. As the woman squeezed her, Villanelle reached into the woman's handbag, fingers deftly finding the wallet tucked among loose tissues and a half-eaten granola bar. She extracted it swiftly, tucking it into her coat pocket, the heaviness of it a burden that mingled with the joy radiating from the woman. When the wife withdrew, her eyes were glazed with tears of relief and hope. "You're doing a wonderful job. Thank you for caring," the woman said, wiping away her tears with trembling hands. Villanelle's heart twisted painfully at the thought of betraying that gratitude, but her path was marked by survival and liberation. "Of course," she replied, forcing a bright smile to cover her guilt. "I'll be nearby if you need anything." With that, she backed away, allowing herself a moment to collect her thoughts as she exited the room. The briefcase still clutched in one hand, the wallet nestled in her pocket, a trophy from this day's desperate hunt. The hollow ache within her felt impossibly heavy as she walked down the corridor, and the gleam of freedom now bore a weight of its own. Outside the hospital's oppressive walls lay the chaos she craved, the adrenaline that surged with each heartbeat, but the taste of her deception lingered bitter on her tongue. She needed to push forward to reclaim her life on her terms, even if it meant playing the part of the villain. As she ducked into another hallway, the echoes of her impromptu performance still reverberated in her mind, but for now, the escape was the only story worth living. Villanelle closed the door to her hospital room softly behind her, the comforting click of the latch resonating as she leaned against it. Her breath hitched for a moment, a temporary reprieve from the adrenaline pulsing through her veins. She retrieved the wallet from her coat pocket with eager fingers, excitement bubbling within her as she pried it open, only to be met with disappointment. A meager sum stared back at her, a few crumpled bills and a small handful of coins that jingled when she tipped the wallet upside down. Villanelle scowled, her initial thrill fading into frustration. "Pathetic," she muttered, tossing the wallet onto the bed. It landed on top of her briefcase, a tarnished testament to her recent misadventures. The silence of the room enveloped her, but it was soon broken by a familiar voice. "You know, if you're looking for more packing supplies, I think there's a Hewlett-Packard trolley in the back storage room." It was Gabriel, her only friend in this drab world of antiseptic smells and stark white walls. He leaned casually against the far wall, a glimmer of amusement in his eyes. Villanelle arched an eyebrow, crossing her arms defiantly. "Oh, really? You think I'm jock?" Gabriel burst into laughter, cutting her off mid-sentence. "You're funny, you know that." Her smile faded as she locked eyes with him, the sudden intensity in her gaze transforming the air between them. She stepped closer, the playful facade altering to something far darker. Her voice dropped into a low, chilling tone. "Yes, I am funny." Gabriel swallowed hard, taken aback by her shift. The levity slipped from the room, replaced by an almost palpable tension. He could feel the weight of her intensity pressing against him, an invisible force that demanded acknowledgement, a truth that lingered unspoken. "Are your parents coming to visit?" she asked, veering the conversation in a new direction, hoping to deflect the heaviness that had settled between them. It was a question she had pondered often, compelled to know more about the man who had been her anchor in this sea of uncertainty. But as the words left her lips, Villanelle noticed the change in Gabriel's demeanor. The laughter disappeared, replaced by a stark hollow presence. He leaned back against the wall as if seeking solace in its coldness, his face dimming as shadows danced across his features. "They're not," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. The darkness that engulfed him was both agonizing and familiar. "Gabriel, what do you mean?" Villanelle pressed, her heart aching at the sight of him retreating into himself. Everything about her demeanor softened, she felt a pang of empathy slicing through her earlier bravado. "They died in the accident," he finally managed to utter, each word spilling from his lips with a weight that struck Villanelle like a blow. The truth hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. It was a truth he had fought against, but now it laid bare before them both. Villanelle absorbed the revelation, and for a moment, everything else faded into the background. The need for masks, the survival games she played, none of it mattered against the raw, aching reality that Gabriel now faced. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice trembling with sincerity. "I didn't know." Gabriel's gaze faltered, the memories flooding back. He had built walls around his heart, locking away the pain of loss in dark corners of his mind. It was easier not to face the truth, to pretend they might still visit, to immerse himself in distractions rather than allow the grief to engulf him whole. "It's fine," he said, though the strain in his voice betrayed him. "It's been hard. I didn't want to think about it." Villanelle understood that feeling all too well. They were both trapped in their own prisons, hers an isolation of her own making, and his one of unavoidable sorrow. She stepped forward, bridging the chasm of silence, her resolve softening in the face of his vulnerability. "Sometimes facing the truth is the hardest part," she murmured, seeking to comfort him, her intensity subdued for the moment. Gabriel looked up, his eyes meeting hers, the flicker of vulnerability lighting a spark of connection between them. "Yeah, it is. But eventually, you have to accept it, don't you?" "Acceptance, it's just another type of freedom," she whispered, a barely audible truth that resonated both painfully and beautifully between them. In that moment, a bond forged in shared shadows and sorrows began to weave itself in the silence. The world outside their hospital walls felt a million miles away, and together, they ventured into the darkness not to escape, but to face what lay there, hand in hand. And as they stood there, surrounded by the remnants of their respective struggles, Villanelle felt a flicker of something unexpected rise within her, a belief that perhaps, just perhaps, they could find a way through the night together. Chapter 4: Fractured Reflections. The hospital room was a cacophony of fluorescent lights and distant beeping machines. It was a sterile environment, the kind of place where hope and despair intertwined in a dance of shadows. Villanelle paced the small confines of their shared space, her movements becoming increasingly erratic. Gabriel watched closely, concern etching lines across his forehead. There was something unsettling about her energy, a crackling instability that made his heart race. "Villanelle, you don't look cool," he remarked, attempting to break through her restless state with a teasing tone, hoping to lighten the heavy atmosphere. She paused, her eyes narrowing slightly, and shot back, "I'm fine." But her words lacked conviction, the tremor in her voice betraying the facade she tried to uphold. Just as Gabriel opened his mouth to reply, Villanelle wavered, her body swaying like a sapling in the wind before she crumpled to the floor. The sound of her impact echoed sharply in the sterile room, a stark reminder of her fragility. Gabriel rushed to her side, panic flooding him. "Hey! Villanelle!" He knelt beside her, shaking her shoulder gently. Her response was a soft snoring, a sudden shift from tension to slumber, and Gabriel felt an unexpected lightness bloom within his chest. Her breath was rhythmic and calming, not quite what he anticipated after the whirlwind of emotions that preceded it. He allowed himself a moment of laughter, a soft, bittersweet chuckle that echoed against the sterile walls. But that moment was short-lived. When Villanelle stirred, her eyes fluttered open, irritation swirling in their depths. She took in the sight of Gabriel beside her, an unexpected annoyance flickering across her features. "What are you looking at?" she mumbled, disappointment creeping onto her face as if she had woken up to a horrible reality. Gabriel, ever the joker, smirked playfully. "You snore, by the way. It's kind of cute." A flash of anger sparked in Villanelle's icy demeanor. "Yet? Your parents are dead," she shot back, her voice dripping with disdain, as if wielding the statement like a weapon. Gabriel was taken aback, but beneath the initial sting of her words, he sensed something deeper, a shared torment they both danced around. He couldn't help himself, a laugh bubbled up, dark and tinged with tragedy. He had loved his parents fiercely, and the grief weighed heavily on him, but he couldn't allow Villanelle that victory, that indication that she could wound him so easily. "Touché," he replied, laughter turning into a choked breath, swallowing down the tears that threatened to escape like a storm wanting to break free. The tension shifted between them, thickening before it snapped, and Villanelle began gathering her things with a renewed purpose. She rummaged through the contents of her briefcase, the items clinking and rustling as she threw aside knickknacks and trivialities. Her eyes flicked to Gabriel. "I need your clothes," she demanded, a sudden fierce determination in her tone. Gabriel raised an eyebrow in surprise, but he complied, handing her a pair of pajama bottoms and an old shirt that had seen better days. "I hope you don't mind a little pre-owned flair," he quipped, watching as she changed. Villanelle pulled on his pajama pants, the fabric falling loose around her hips. She tugged on the shirt, and for a brief moment, a flicker of vulnerability passed through her eyes as she caught her reflection in the small, cracked mirror on the wall. The sight of her wearing his clothes soft, worn down by time struck a chord that both intrigued and unsettled her. "Stylish, right?" Gabriel teased, attempting to break the lingering tension in the air. "Shut up, Gabriel," she shot back, but her voice lacked its usual bite. Though she fought against it, a small smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. The dynamic between them had subtly shifted, an awareness dawning in the heated aftermath of their earlier confrontation. They were two fractured souls navigating a reality filled with darkness and shadows, but somehow, in this moment of altered attire, something akin to camaraderie began to blossom. As Villanelle zipped her bag, gathering the remnants of her sporadic lifestyle, she glanced at Gabriel, his expression softer, his laughter still tinged with sadness. "You know," she said finally, "this doesn't make us friends." Gabriel chuckled. "Sure it doesn't," he replied, knowing full well that beneath the veneer of banter, there was a tenuous bond forming. Two people lost in a world that had dealt them rough hands, now journeying together, however awry or unpredictable it might be. Villanelle returned to his side, a newfound understanding settling over them as they joined in their shared quietude, two hearts tethered by threads of loss and laughter, uncertain of what lay ahead, yet unwilling to let the darkness consume them whole. Chapter 6, Echoes of Silence. The sterile, dimly lit hospital room felt even smaller as Villanelle tossed aside the remnants of her chaotic collection in a desperate search for coins. Her fingers danced over the thin material of her discarded clothing, and she scoured every crevice of the space, eyes darting like a hawk on the hunt. Her mind raced. How could she have been so careless? Coins meant freedom, a chance to escape this stifling atmosphere, even for just a brief moment. "Gabriel, don't you have any relatives?" she called out, searching his face for a hint of hope. "Do they have any money? I can perhaps use it to get out of here." The plea hung in the air like a suffocating cloud, but instead of the expected response, Villanelle was met with a hesitant silence. Gabriel sunk deeper into himself, head slowly lowering as his own thoughts spiraled into shadows. The walls seemed to constrict around him, and those suffocating memories crept back: the warmth of his mother's embrace, the laughter echoing from his father. "No, I have no one," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper, the weight of those words painfully evident. My mom and dad, that's it. Emotion thickened in his throat, almost forcing out a tear that he swallowed back down. Villanelle, sensing the shift in him, felt her anger boil over. This wasn't the time for grief, wasn't the time for much softness. You are not helping me, Gabriel, she snapped, her frustration spilling out as if it were the only way to exert control in a situation where everything felt out of her hands. The sharpness of her words stung more deep than she'd intended. Guilt washed over Gabriel like a cold wave. He lay back against the stiff hospital mattress, feeling utterly useless. His heart raced beneath the weight of his inadequacy, like a stone pressing down on his chest. No consoled words came to mind. He was left with the silence echoing around him, amplifying the desolation that crept into every corner of his being. Villanelle turned away from him, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Anger, though she knew it wasn't aimed solely at Gabriel, was her only means of asserting some control over her chaotic emotions. Her frustrations had roots in desperation. She couldn't afford to allow the current moment to sweep her into a blanket of despair, not when she was inching closer to an escape. What do you expect from me? Gabriel's muffled voice reached her, thin and brittle. It broke her moment of rage into fragments, forcing her to consider the grim reality that surrounded them both, a shared kind of solitude that reverberated through the room. I can't fix this for you, Villanelle. I can't. It's not about fixing, she huffed, hands dropping to her sides, her tone softening reluctantly. It's about surviving. The moment of clarity hit her. She was thrumming with raw adrenaline, and in this space, survival meant finding a way out, together or alone. Gabriel turned his head, peering at her through the depths of self-recrimination and dark memories swirling behind his eyes. Survival means accepting the pain too, doesn't it? The words came out barely as a question, they were heavy with an encompassing realization of loss that engulfed him each time he let his guard down. Pain doesn't matter if we're dead, she fired back, frustration and urgency blending in her voice. I need to escape. Now. A silence fell between them, thick and palpable. Villanelle felt the weight of it, mixing with the tension they had crafted in the moments before. She took a deep breath, running a hand through her disheveled hair. There has to be something in this place, she said, her voice quieter now, a simmering determination taking hold. Something I can use. Gabriel looked around the room, narrowed his gaze, and considered their surroundings in a way he hadn't before. The stark whiteness of the room, the clinical shadows that loomed, now felt like trapping walls instead of a refuge. Check behind the bed, he suggested hesitantly, losing himself in thoughts of impossibilities. Villanelle didn't need to be told twice, she was already at the edge of the bed, her fingertips brushing against the wooden frame in search of secrets. You ever think about running away? She asked, her voice steadying as she shifted her focus from anger to strategy. Gabriel watched her, noticing the fire that ignited within her, the ferocity that cut through her moments of despair. All the time, he admitted, surprising himself with the honesty. But it's always been with them in mind. Then think of something better, Villanelle shot back, her spirited resolve igniting a small spark within Gabriel's chest. Picture it. Freedom. Pity against the world. For the first time in what felt like ages, a small glimmer of hope darted through the shadows suffocating him. If the two of them could somehow weave their shared despair into something stronger, something that wouldn't allow the past to suffocate the future, perhaps there was a way forward. Just then, Villanelle's fingers grazed over something cold and metallic wedged between the bed and the wall. She pulled it out triumphantly, an old, crumpled coin. Look, she exclaimed, her eyes gleaming with newfound purpose. We just need to keep looking. There's bound to be more. Gabriel managed a weak smile, infused with both caution and an unspoken longing for the adventure that loomed ahead, even if it flickered uncertainly. Let's see what else we can find. Together. With that, Villanelle nodded, determination brightening her expression as desperation ebbed slightly, replaced with the thrill of potential. Their pain was still there, lingering like the shadows of their pasts, but maybe just maybe they could carve out a path together, one step at a time. Chapter 7, The Uncovered Truth. The room remained steeped in an oppressive stillness, punctuated only by the soft hum of fluorescent lights above. Villanelle's heart raced with every moment spent rummaging through the confines of the small hospital space, desperation driving her. She felt her pulse thump in her ears, drowning out the world. With frustration boiling over, she made a beeline for the heavy curtain that divided her desperation from Gabriel's quiet turmoil. Drawing it back with an impatient shove, she briefly hoped for a miracle and escape, a flicker of something she needed, yet was always just out of reach. Instead, all she found was the view of an unchanging hospital corridor, dull and lifeless. While she fumed at the empty space beyond the curtain, Gabriel's thoughts lingered in the periphery of her mind, filling the silence with echoes of shadows too heavy to voice. It wasn't just the physical darkness of the room, it was the darkness that clung to him, a constant companion pressuring him to surrender to despair. His mind drifted back to the doctor's soft words, the pitiful attempts at reassurance. It could be anything from a mere bruise to a huge hole in his skull. Each phrase clung to him like a specter, the implication gnawing at his resolve like an unending ache. Inside, he battled the shadows, desperately searching for the bravery to let Villanelle in, to allow her to see the truth beneath the bandage that covered half his face. "Would you like to look at my bandage?" Gabriel finally managed to say, his voice barely beyond a whisper. He could feel the heaviness in the air pressing down on him, his heart racing as he braced for her reaction. "The good side isn't pretty, either. The doctors won't let me know. It makes me worried. You can look at it, if that's your thing." Even as he spoke, self-doubt wrapped around his words like a vice. Villanelle hesitated, her fingers brushing against the hem of her shirt, torn between frustration and curiosity. The tension was palpable, thick with an unspoken understanding of the struggles they both faced. Yet the emptiness of the room mocked her attempts to stay composed. Finding no other outlet for her rage, she spun around to him, brows furrowing in exasperation. "Fine," she shouted, the words snapping through the air like a whip. She crossed back over to the edge of the bed, muscles taut with determination, and stubbornly settled herself beside him. Without waiting for his approval, she tore the edge of the bandage from his skin, the action fueled by an intense cocktail of frustration and urgency. "Let's just get this over with," Villanelle snapped, her irritation boiling over as she instinctively pushed past any form of gentleness. "Ouch!" Gabriel flinched, the pain biting into him sharper than he expected. He blinked at her through his remaining eye, the other half of his face swaddled in gauze. She looked at him with an intensity that burned brighter than any indignation, a heat that made him feel both vulnerable and exposed. "What?" Villanelle shot back, irritation etched on her features as she then focused intently on what lay beneath the obscuring fabric. The bandage slipped away to reveal not just wounds, but a painful story penned in scars and bruises, ones that spoke of battles fought both in silence and with fervor. "It looks worse than I thought," she muttered under her breath, a flicker of realization settling over her, intertwining with her frustration. Immediate regret crept into her heart. The fierce determination that propelled her was now intertwined with some sense of remorse for the volatile way she unraveled the bandage. Gabriel's gaze fell to the floor, his heart sinking beneath the weight of her scrutiny. "I told you, it's not pretty," he murmured, his voice trailing off into a whisper, a veil of self-doubt mixing with the pain radiating from his wounds. "No, it's not just that," Villanelle retorted, wrestling with the urge to find the right words. "You say things like it doesn't matter, but it does. It matters that you're hurt. It matters that you're hiding behind this bandage." The tension crackled between them, vibrant yet delicate, as the truth soared through the air like a fragile bird. Gabriel could feel the vulnerability expanding within him. It fluttered desperately against the weight of shame, daring him to break the silence that had trapped them both for so long. "What does it matter to you?" he asked, his voice rough but softening, revealing the wounds hidden beneath the surface of his bitterness. "You don't have to carry my burdens." Maybe not, but you're still trying to push me away, Villanelle replied, her fiery demeanor steadying just a touch. You can't cite all this alone, Gabriel. Don't you fully see that? For an agonizing moment, they locked eyes, and the silence that followed said what words could not. In those few fleeting seconds, Gabriel let the darkness spill into the light for just a heartbeat. He felt the turmoil of his world crashing against Villanelle's unyielding resolve, two hearts battered, yet somehow still thrumming with strength and a pulse of defiance. As the gravity of their shared struggle bound them closer together, Villanelle leaned in, studying the scars that marked his face not with disgust, but with understanding. There was an unadulterated beauty in their vulnerability, an emotion that flowed stronger than any veneer they had both erected in their desperation to keep the other at arm's length. You're not alone, she said quietly, the edge of her frustration blurring into gentle compassion. Let me in. Please. Gabriel remained still for a beat longer before letting out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. I don't know how, he admitted, his voice faint but sincere. That's okay, she promised, determination etching itself onto her features. We can figure it out together. With a heavy heart, he nodded, the dark clouds hanging over him parting just a little, revealing a glimmer of hope. Maybe there was a path forward, however uncertain it might be. Together. Only together would they confront the tapestry of scars, each thread a story of their past, and discover the strength woven within. Chapter 8, Monsters and Revelations. The fluorescent lights flickered in the sterile hospital room, casting an unflattering glare on Gabriel's face. Each pulse of anxiety drummed a frantic beat in his chest, intensifying with every passing moment. He shifted uncomfortably on the bed, half hidden behind the crumpled sheets, feeling the weight of his bandages like lead. Across from him, Villanelle's excitement bubbled over, radiant and sharp against the gloominess that clung to the air. She bounced on her heels, a fierce energy emanating from her that contrasted with Gabriel's sinking feeling. Her enthusiasm, usually so infectious, felt like a weight that pressed against his already frayed nerves. Gabriel frowned, trying to harness the storm within him, but it surged wildly. Is it bad? He asked, the words tumbling out of his mouth in a frantic whisper. The question lingered between them as he searched her gaze for a shred of reassurance. She paused for a moment, her expression shifting into one of seriousness. Far from good at all, she replied, her tone grave but softened by an underlying playfulness that only she could summon. The air grew thick with unspoken truths, and Gabriel felt the anxiety twist within him. He stared at her in disbelief, his heart racing faster at the thought of what the words truly meant. What was far from good? Villanelle's vibrant eyes suddenly scanned his face, her amusement mischievous and brightening the dim atmosphere. A smirk crept across her lips as she leaned forward, eyebrows arched playfully. You look like a pizza, she declared, her laughter bubbling up like champagne. Caught off guard, Gabriel furrowed his brow, confusion painting his features. A pizza? He held his hands to his face as if trying to hide himself. I'm a monster, he exclaimed, leaning back dramatically as if the weight of the world had just been thrust upon him. What? She laughed, clearly enjoying his overreaction. You're not a monster. You've got character. But the words fell flat against the storm in Gabriel's mind. Suddenly, he felt both exposed and vulnerable, stripped down to the rawness of his insecurity. The remnants of self-worth that clung to him shattered under the weight of Villanelle's teasing. In a flurry of impulsiveness, she lifted the last bandage, excitement radiating from her like the sun bursting through clouds. Whoa! Did you lose an eye? Villanelle's voice rose in glee, as if she were unearthing buried treasure. It pierced through the heavy fog of darkness that cloaked Gabriel's thoughts. In that moment, the terror he felt was profound, a relentless swell that clawed at his insides, as if the shadows were reaching for him with jagged fingers. No, no. You can't say that, he screamed, panic erupting, his voice a mixture of rage and despair. Fuck you. The words shot from his lips before he could catch them, a reflexive defense against the horror and vulnerability of the moment. Villanelle halted, surprise etched on her features, her laughter dying in the air. "What?" she asked, confusion darting through her eyes. "You told me to be honest, Gabriel." Gabriel's breath quickened, a flushed combination of embarrassment and fear consuming him. "Not like that. Not about losing an eye. You don't understand," he stammered, clutching at the sheets as though they could ground him from the spiraling chaos in his mind. He felt as though he was teetering on the brink of a dark abyss. "But it's just a question," she argued, her brows knitting together. "I thought we were being honest with each other." "No, you don't get it," he shouted, frustration boiling over. "What if it's true? What if I am a monster? What if losing an eye is just the beginning? This is all just too much." His eyes squeezed shut, a torrent of emotions crashing over him. Nothing seemed to fit, to make sense, and the lurking shadows of his anxiety bore down, feeding off his fear like a dark symbiote. Villanelle stared at him, her own excitement dimming as she realized the gravity of the situation. She took a step back, the humor fading from her lips. "Gabriel. It's not just your words, it's everything," he interrupted, trembling now, the remnants of his bravado splintering under the weight of reality. "What if I'm not the same? What if I don't look normal anymore?" His fretful eyes searched hers, desperately pleading for understanding. The darkness surrounding him felt insurmountable. He was teetering on the edge of panic and despair, grappling to stay grounded. Villanelle's expression softened as she stepped closer again. "Hey, look at me," she said gently, her voice quieting as she moved closer, trying to steady him with her presence. "You're still you, Gabriel, and appearance doesn't change that. Whatever happens, it doesn't make you a monster." His gaze faltered, clinging to her sincerity as he fought against the whirlwind within. There was something in her eyes, a flicker of warmth that began to soothe the tempest brewing inside him. But anxiety lingered like a spectre, whispering doubts that echoed endlessly. Would it ever be enough? Would Villanelle be able to see him beneath the scars and bandages? "Promise," he murmured finally, his voice cracking with uncertainty. "Promise," she reaffirmed, her tone steady and unwavering. In the fragile cocoon of their moment, the bond between them stirred, and though shadows still loomed, Villanelle's unwavering resolve anchored him against the storm. She reached for his hand, her touch igniting a spark of courage. Together, amidst the swirling chaos, they would navigate the landscape of their fears, discovering strength in vulnerability, and perhaps redefining what it truly meant to be seen. Chapter 8: The Pizza Incident. Gabriel sat in the dark, comfortable embrace of his makeshift cocoon, a mound of pillows and blankets that formed a barricade against the world outside. Though it was late afternoon, the sunlight poured into the room, illuminating the scuffs and quirks that decorated the walls. Yet, his mind was turbulent, a storm of chaotic thoughts spiraling within. Villanelle, perched on the edge of a chair, grinned mischievously. "You know, Gabriel, if you were a pizza, you'd definitely be the extra cheesy kind," she teased, her eyes twinkling with playfulness. That was it. The mention of pizza stirred a reaction deep within him, a boiling annoyance that erupted at her relentless frivolity. "Really?" he shot back, sarcasm dripping from his voice. "A pizza? That's all I am to you?" She raised an eyebrow, clearly unfazed by his indignation. "Tasty and irresistible, just like a pizza." "It's a compliment," she quipped, but Gabriel wasn't having it. In an impulsive reflex, he flipped his finger at her, an exasperated gesture that somehow felt much heavier in the moment. The action sliced through the jovial atmosphere like a sharp knife, deflating the lightness in the room. Villanelle's laughter faltered, and hurt flickered in her eyes before she quickly masked it with stubbornness. She stuck out her tongue at him, a childish act that exuded defiance. "You're being unreasonable, you know." Her expression was a mix of disappointment and playful defiance, but it did little to soothe Gabriel's simmering frustration. He turned away from her, shutting her out like a film reel that had suddenly come to a halt. But beneath the storm of his annoyance, a flicker of warmth began to surface. In the midst of their banter, he noticed Villanelle packing her bag, methodically tossing in her belongings, and something within him began to shift. Watching her meticulously fold shirts and roll up dresses felt like a quiet end to their unwritten story, and his heart ached at the thought of losing her presence, however turbulent. Gabriel sat up abruptly, confusion and concern etched across his face. "You're leaving?" Villanelle glanced at him over her shoulder, slightly taken aback by the sudden seriousness in his tone. "Yeah, I'm heading to London," she confirmed, zipping up her bag with a resolute finality. "Is your girlfriend going to stab you again?" he asked, the edge to his voice softening. The history behind her relationship with Eve lingered in the air, heavy with unresolved tension. She shrugged, her confidence returning swiftly. "I don't think so. I know Eve better than anyone now, probably even better than I know myself." Villanelle's eyes sparkled with a mix of pride and self-awareness. "We've broken each other down and rebuilt ourselves more times than I can count. Look complicated, but it works." Gabriel's gaze dropped to the floor, mulling over her words. He didn't know much about love or relationships, but he could relate to the struggle of trusting someone. "You're saying that you shouldn't trust people based on their looks?" Villanelle paused, her mind racing as she thought about it. "Exactly. Looks can be deceiving, Gabriel. Just because someone seems tough doesn't mean they are. And just because someone has a pretty face doesn't mean they won't hurt you." He considered her advice, the weight of it settling into him. "You've had your share of hurt, haven't you?" he murmured, a mix of sympathy and the faintest hint of admiration brewing within him. "Who hasn't?" she shot back, a glimmer of defiance in her demeanor. She turned to face him fully, a serious expression marring her playful facade. "But you can't let that darkness control you. Embrace it, but don't let it define you." In that moment, a strange sense of camaraderie enveloped them, a shared understanding that transcended words. Villanelle's passion flickered in her gaze, intertwining with Gabriel's burgeoning resolve. He wanted to shout for her to stay, to beat back the hesitant dread gnawing at him, but the words felt trapped in his throat. Instead, he resorted to the familiar safety of sarcasm. "So, if I'm a pizza, does that make you the toppings? Because without you, I'd just be plain." Villanelle laughed, the sound lightening the atmosphere once more as she placed her hands on her hips. "Oh please, I'm definitely the extra cheese. Everyone knows that's the best part." Gabriel couldn't help but smile, the weight of his darkness lifting just a little as they shared another moment of absurdity amid the realities of their lives. But soon, the gravity of their conversation lingered like a bittersweet aftertaste, and the knowledge of her imminent departure hung heavy in the air. "Just, be careful in London," he said finally, sincerity threading through his usual bravado. She nodded, her expression softening as genuine concern shimmered in her eyes. "You too, Gabriel. Don't let the monsters in your head win. Remember, you're not just a pizza. You're more than that." As she turned back to finish packing, Gabriel leaned against the wall, feeling the warmth of their connection flare in his chest. Villanelle, a vibrant mess of energy and chaos, was leaving, but she was also taking a piece of his darkness with her, allowing a brighter light to seep into the cracks he thought were forever shadowed. He resolutely vowed to face the world head-on, allowing her wisdom to guide him on the path ahead. And in that moment, he realized that even a slice of darkness could lead to a new beginning, as long as he was willing to embrace the light. As Gabriel sat amidst the clutter of their shared moments, a flicker of optimism ignited within him, illuminating the corners of his shadowy thoughts. "You know, Villanelle," he began, his voice warmer with hope, "I really think everything is possible. Maybe all this damage it's not as bad as I thought. Maybe I can be normal." The words hung in the air, buoyant and fragile like a soap bubble, a dream waiting to be realized. But Villanelle, ever the realist, felt a pang of protectiveness rise within her. She couldn't allow him to sink too deep into those naive dreams that felt as though they could easily shatter. "Don't count on it," she said coldly, her tone cutting through the air with icy honesty, as sharp as the blade she carried. Gabriel's optimism clung to the edges of his frustration, refusing to dissipate despite her retort. "It may get better," he insisted, his eyes bright with determination. The naivete of his words dripped with an innocent hope that both amused and worried Villanelle. She tilted her head and smiled mockingly, the expression both teasing and unsettling. "I doubt it." Her dry humor offered little solace, and the weight of her skepticism hung heavily between them, mingling with Gabriel's own burgeoning despair. The barrier crumbled. Gabriel felt the heat of frustration pool behind his eyes, threatening to spill over. "Thank you, Villanelle," he murmured, voice cracking. "You're the only one that's honest." The words slipped out, heavy with a vulnerability he rarely permitted himself to reveal. At that moment, the hardened exterior of the assassin melted away, if only for a moment. As the first tear rolled down Gabriel's cheek, it seemed to bridge the chasm between them, reaching even the depths of the armored heart of Villanelle. Feeling the gravity of his breakdown, she stooped down beside him, a rare gesture of comfort emanating from the infamous killer. "Hey, hey," she soothed softly, leaning closer, her voice unexpectedly gentle. "It could be cool, you know? You can have an eye patch." The suggestion, as playful as it was absurd, broke through the tension, eliciting a small chuckle from Gabriel amidst his tears. But as her teasing faded, Gabriel's self-pity surfaced like an unwanted tide crashing onto the shore. "I want to be normal," he confessed, voice trembling and raw. The rest of the world felt so polished and pristine, and here he was, grappling with his broken pieces. Villanelle narrowed her eyes, unable to stifle her amusement. "You're such a drama queen," she replied, but there was no malice in her words, only a teasing edge that reflected affection rather than disdain. It was a glimpse into their peculiar friendship, a blend of comfort and chaos that colored their interactions. He shot her a lingering glance, half pleading, half challenging. "It's not drama if it hurts," he pointed out, finding strength in the familiar rhythm of their banter even as tears pooled in his eyes. "Fine, fine," she conceded, brushing a finger across her own cheek with a faint dramatic flair. "But you don't need to dwell in pity parties. Nobody likes those." The corners of her mouth curled up as she nudged him playfully. Gabriel couldn't help but chuckle through his tears, the goofy absurdity of it all lightening the mood. "You're probably right, but you could at least pretend to be sympathetic sometimes." Villanelle laughed, the sound chimed like a bell, brightening the atmosphere around them. "Honey, sympathy is for people who deserve it. And I have business to run." Gabriel wiped his cheeks with the back of his hand, an uncertain smile creeping across his face. "Business? Like what? Assassinating people?" "Exactly. But only bad ones," she smirked, her tone sarcastic yet casual. "And you can turn out to be a bad one if you keep whining." He huffed, catching his breath, a balance forming as he searched for a suitable retort. "How about I just be the guy who occasionally cries in front of friends?" "Much better," Villanelle replied, her gaze softening. "And remember, if you ever need a partner for your dramatic performances, I'll be there with an eye patch." For a moment, amidst the light-hearted back and forth, the shadows that shadowed their lives felt lighter. In the warmth of their peculiar friendship, Gabriel found a glimmer of hope. Perhaps it wasn't so foolish to dream, even if Villanelle remained the ever-present voice of reality, tempering his highs with her grounded approach. As they sat together, laughter mingling with tears, the complexities of their lives collided, forming a comforting tapestry threaded with humor, pain, and a shared understanding that they were both seeking something that felt a little more like home. Chapter X: The Facade of Normalcy. The sterile air of the hospital room felt suffocating to Gabriel. It wasn't just the antiseptic scent that weighed down his chest but the penetrating stares that he imagined permeated every corner. He despised the attention, the eyes that lingered too long on his bandaged wounds, the whispers that followed him like shadows. All he wanted was to fade into the background, to blend in seamlessly with the crowd. To be normal. Normal is boring, Villanelle said, her voice laced with a playful lilt that belied the gravity of their conversation. She perched casually on the edge of his hospital bed, her appearance deceptively ordinary, but he knew better. Beneath her seemingly mundane exterior lay the heart of a killer, a chaotic frenzy unbound by the constraints of normalcy. "It's not boring, it's safe," Gabriel insisted. His voice trembled, tinged with vulnerability. "I just wish I could go back to that moment, you know? Before the crash. I wish I had died in that car." The weight of his confession hung heavily in the air, thick and suffocating, like the oppressive hospital lighting. The words pierced through Villanelle's playful demeanor, igniting something tumultuous within her. She glanced at him, her mind racing in diverse directions, assessing his despondency through a lens that bordered on incredulous. Part of her believed he was weak, pathetic in his incessant lamentations. His endless whining nagged at her, tugging at the patience she had for his plight. "I think you need a reminder of what weakness looks like," she bit back, her tone sharper now, a warning echoing beneath her casual mask. "You've survived something most wouldn't, it's already admirable." But even as she spoke, her heart softened just slightly toward him. The incongruity of it all was maddening. She wanted to comfort him, to push his despair away like a dark cloud, yet she felt his self-pity clamping down around her throat like a vice. "Would you want to live, looking like this?" he asked, despair oozing from every word. The question lingered, heavy with implication as he searched her gaze for a hint of solidarity. Villanelle hesitated, grappling inwardly with the honesty of her heart. "No," she finally confessed, the truth tumbling out, raw and unrefined. "I wouldn't. It would just be a shitty life." Her voice, though blunt, shimmered with a sliver of compassion. As she pulled him into a hug, wrapping her arms around his shoulders, she could feel the tension radiating from him, an unending torrent of pain and sorrow that threatened to drown them both. But the act of comfort brought forth an unsettling tide of conflicting emotions within her. With every ounce of pity that surged, an undercurrent of rage pulsated violently beneath the surface. It was as if his vulnerability ignited a fire deep inside, pushing her ever closer to the edge of frustration. She pulled away suddenly, her expression shifting from concern to something much darker. The warmth of empathy froze into something icy, an anger that had no specific target, but which surged forth. Gabriel, sensing a shift, searched her eyes for answers, panic rising within him. Before he could utter another syllable, Villanelle grabbed him by the neck, her grip tightening with a ferocity that startled even her. "What is wrong with you?" she snarled, a fury igniting in her expression, pushing away the warmth of her earlier affection. "Stop being such a drama queen." The sound of his neck cracking echoed ominously through the sterile hospital room. Gabriel's expression fell, confusion and fear brimming in his eyes. "Villanelle, please. Just shut up." She held him there, forcing the air from his lungs not out of spite, but more to silence the whirring noise he had become in her head. She wanted to look away, to dismiss his pain and his endless cries, but a part of her felt trapped in that moment. Was it the vulnerability he flaunted so freely? The embodiment of a weakness she had always loathed? "I can't even look at you anymore," she spat, her voice cold and distant. With one swift motion, she threw him away from her, his body landing on the stiff hospital bed with an audible thud that resonated through her. It was as if she had expelled all her pent-up frustration out of him, like tossing aside discarded garbage. Gabriel's eyes, once hopeful, now brimmed with a disordered mixture of betrayal and disbelief. "What? Why?" he managed to choke out, feeling the weight of her deadly push down on him, heavier than any physical injury. "Because you're so caught up in your self-pity, it sickens me," Villanelle shouted, her frustration bubbling over, leaving no room for warmth or comfort. "You've got a chance to be something other than ordinary, and you throw it away. He tried to explain, to piece together the remnants of dignity within his heart. "I'm just trying to find my way back." But her resolve was unyielding. "Shut up," she snapped again, her voice echoing in the stark, sterile confines of the room. She walked out, leaving behind the fragile pieces of someone who just wanted to be whole, standing resolutely against the chaos of her internal whirlwind. In that moment, Villanelle felt a strange liberation, tinged with bitterness but also clarity. She had to let him go. After all, normalcy was entirely overrated, and in the end, it was worth fighting against a violent realization in a world that often demanded one to conform. Yet, as she walked away, part of her knew she had just lost something precious, trudging forward through the sterile corridors echoing with the sounds of life and loss, bearing the weight of what she'd left behind. Villanelle wheeled herself out of the hospital room, her heart still racing from the tumultuous encounter with Gabriel. The metallic whirling of the wheelchair echoed through the sterile hallways, each spin feeling like an escape from a prison of emotions. As she maneuvered past the cold, clinical walls adorned with indifferent medical posters, a deep sense of both exhilaration and unrest coursed through her veins. Meanwhile, Gabriel lifeless on the hospital bed, bleak eyes, retreating into the shadows of his own mind. His thoughts in darkness began to drift back to the moments before the car crash, the flickering images that turned his life into chaotic fragments. The soul could still feel the rush of adrenaline, the vibrant colors of that day, the sun's brightness that now felt mocking against the color of black that had enveloped him. It happened quickly, the transition from half-sight to none at all. One moment, he grasped at the realities of life, the next, he was pulled from it as if someone had thrown a switch, quick blackness devouring everything in its wake. Was this how it felt to die, for a second turn? A sudden, blinding peace washed over him amidst the turmoil, the kind he had sought tirelessly throughout his life. There were no expectations, no burdens or responsibilities, just a vast expanse of nothingness, free of pain in the hollow abyss. In this vast darkness, memories resurfaced like distant stars struggling to shine through the void. He recalled the time he met the enigmatic Russian assassin, her presence a beacon in his lonely, isolated life. She was a figure woven from shadows and allure, a viper wrapped in silk and danger. Villanelle was all-consuming, and he, an unsuspecting moth, drawn towards her flame. He remembered their shared moments, how she had thrived in the precarious balance of fashion and brutality, her aspirations draped in designer labels and laced with violence. Each laugh they shared seemed like a fragile glass shard, hollow yet sharp, reflecting the reality they both sought to escape. With her, Gabriel found a fleeting semblance of salvation, a release from the shackles of solitude that bound him tightly. Villanelle, fierce and intoxicating, became a part of his existence, an obsession that offered warmth amidst the winter of his own despair. Yet even now, in his deepest solitude, he could only see the darkness when they were lost together, adrift in a city that never seemed to care. Life in that concrete jungle often felt like a law unto itself, harsh, unforgiving, ruling over the weak and the lost, deeming them unworthy of mercy. The empty hospital was a haunting reflection of that very jungle, a stark reminder of what survival meant in an indifferent world. The sterile walls that isolated him felt like the neutral limbo where life and death waged confusion relentlessly. Each shrill beep of machines echoed like distant assassinations, reverberating in the hollow corridors laced with the scent of antiseptic and despair. Gabriel's thoughts flickered back to Villanelle. How had she left him? Was she weaving her tapestry of chaos even now, spinning webs of intrigue while he languished in this empty hospital room? He knew she didn't care for the mundane or the ordinary, she thrived in the thrill of the extraordinary. It was impossible for him to resent her for that. He had always, in some secret corner of his heart, admired her wicked freedom. And yet, as memories rushed through the darkness, Gabriel felt himself tethered by a pulsing loneliness, a loneliness deepened by the very knowledge that once, he had tasted a breath of her thrilling presence. It was a hollow victory, laden with irony. Now, he could only recall the flickers of their fleeting adventures, the exhilaration of crossing lines, dancing on the precipice of danger together, only to fall away from one another like strands of smoke dissipating in the air. Fingers gripped helplessly at the sheets, reminding him he was still here, still alive, despite wishing for an escape. Alone in his silent prison, he could only hold on to the shadow of what could have been, the relentless onslaught of his thoughts pounding in his skull like a hellish drum. In the whispering whines of the hospital corridor, he imagined Villanelle racing away, her laughter echoing as she embraced the world outside the chaos and thrill of life. He was consumed by the absence of her fire, the realization settling in, her dance in the light had irrevocably dimmed his own. "Goodbye, Gabriel," he seemed to hear her voice carried by the wind, a haunting farewell that filled him with longing but an equal measure of comfort. In the dark, he sought solace from the very shadows that consumed him, finding peace not in resolution, but in acceptance, the understanding that sometimes, survival itself could be the greatest torment of all. As the quiet enveloped him, he succumbed to the nothingness, surrendering to the finality of it all, with only echoes of laughter and whispers of danger lingering, floating like shadows in the dark. Epilogue. In the celestial realm, where light glimmered like the most precious jewels, Gabriel sat indignant on a throne that felt far more like a gilded cage than a place of honor. Dubbed the whiny king of heaven, he wrapped himself in layers of divine negativity, his golden halo a faint echo of better days. Today, as he slouched, despair and frustration draped over him like a heavy cloak. The echoes of angelic voices filled the ethereal space, a melodious chorus that had grown increasingly discordant, every note condemning Villanelle. "Let her be damned," they sang, their harmonies intertwining in a symphony of disgust. The higher-ranking angels, their wings cutting through the air with divine grace, judged her with disdain. "Let her fall into the abyss. For she has betrayed the sanctity of innocence." Infinite heights above the earth, Gabriel gazed into the divine abyss, wishing with all his strength to be anything but the reluctant custodian of such celestial judgments. On his throne of negativity, he sought solace in an absurd thought: why can't I just be a pizza? A single pizza, with all the ordinary toppings, pepperoni, olives, and a sprinkle of cheese symbolizing the normality he so desperately craved. To be normal, to live without the burdens of celestial judgment, seemed like a utopian dream. But the whispers of his parents lingered, their echoes steeped in benevolence and wisdom. "Gabriel," his father had once said, "you are meant for greatness. You must find strength within you." His mother's serene voice hummed along, "You are a beacon, my child. Shoulders will bear the weight, you have the power to rise." Yet, at that moment, all he could focus on was the swirling chaos brought by Villanelle's actions. She was chaos incarnate, a tempest unraveling all notions of peace in his world. The angels around him quivered, some spirits visibly insulted by her audacity. Gabriel felt the collective disapproval wash over him like a bitter tide. From the corner of his eye, he saw Eve Polastri observing him with sharp intent. Holding an apple in her delicate hands, she analyzed it as if contemplating the world's deeper mysteries. "How," she pondered aloud, her voice echoing softly, "could Villanelle do this to a poor child like you, Gabriel?" Behind her, Nico leaned against a golden pillar, arms crossed defiantly. "Villanelle is nothing more than a scourge," he scoffed, drawing a parallel that simmered in their heated conversation. "She's akin to Hamas, undermining the democracy of Israel with her destructive ways. Just as they ravage the Holy Land, the chaos she sows destroys the sanctity of innocence here." Gabriel's heart sank at the intensity of their exchanges. How could they compare? Villanelle was not a terrorist, she was a force of nature, a chaotic storm that captivated while it devastated. But she was also a martyr, holding the world of malice invisible to all, an ordinary soul embroiled in madness while he remained a saint, burdened by a legacy too grand for his serene desires. "Every angel and spirit would aspire to be normal if they stood in your shoes," Eve said, breaking through his swirling doubts. "Yet you remain so much more in eternal purity in the face of despair." But what did that mean for someone who simply wished to blend into the canvas of life's mundane existence? The normal folks cried out to him even now, yearning for recognition while Villanelle engaged in her endless dance of chaos. A martyr she was, indeed a tragic embodiment of freedom intertwined with destruction. The angelic symphony continued, rising to new heights of condemnation, each note piercing through Gabriel's fragile resolve. He pressed the apple to his chest, its perfect skin glistening under the ethereal light, contrasting the turmoil raging within. "What do you want from me?" he finally cried, his voice echoing through the celestial halls. "Do you wish for me to cast her away like fallen leaves? To sever the ties that bind us?" As the last note lingered in the air, silence enveloped the chamber, a peaceful pause that felt like eternity. The angels traded hesitant glances, awaiting some grand proclamation that could stem the rising tide of emotion. Gabriel's breath steadied in the heavy stillness. He realized that, whether he willed it or not, he could not simply cast Villanelle into the void. She was a part of his ongoing story. Every jagged edge she brought to his existence only intensified the vibrancy of their twisted relationship. Perhaps that chaos also nurtured the seeds of strength his parents urged him to cultivate. "I won't condemn her," he finally declared, his voice resolute, cutting through the malaise. "If that makes me different, then so be it. If I am to be a saint in the eyes of all spirits, then let my choice echo normality in the presence of such a complex martyr." The harmonious angelic discord muted into confused murmurs, a blend of disbelief and curiosity. Eve's expression softened as she tilted her head, recognizing the wisdom entwined in his vulnerability. Nico, however, clenched his fists, struggling against the tides of change Gabriel had summoned. For in that pivotal moment, Gabriel chose not only to embrace the chaotic presence of Villanelle but also to acknowledge the unique strength bred from his internal battle between condemnation and acceptance. Angelic spirits shimmered in anticipation, awaiting whatever fate the heavens had in store now that the whiny king of heaven had unraveled himself in the tapestry of existence. As the whispers of doubt and hope melded together, darkness and light danced and swirled like a tempest, perhaps creating something wholly new amid this celestial turmoil. With every choice remaining intricate and resplendent, Gabriel's heart pulsed, beating in time with the rhythm of a life not defined by others, but rather illuminated through the choices that would lead him to the stillness of his own truth. And so, the echoes resonated through heaven, shaping the fate of his world. Villanelle's relentless spirit entwined within his own, forever marking the sacred space they shared amidst chaos. The end.